anywhere that you can be able to reach cast, you should be able to watch it in real time. So I shall put in the link into the Catalyst Book Club for the live, and then
is Restream managing this, or is it some other service?
yeah, it is Restream. Yeah, so it's going out to like Twitter and Twitch and Periscope to the same thing. D Live, Facebook, all that good stuff. So let's have a look. I think I managed to get the YouTube link. Let's see. Miss Neona, is your proposal in Fund 5?
I guess so, kind of. I don't know what I've done. So what? Because I am complex, and I don't fit into boxes normally. At least like parts of me is hanging out everywhere. So I tried to make it clear and digestible. So I ended up separating one into how I wanted to help the community. And then the other one is how I want to tie my local community back in with like recursion and flywheel effects and stuff like that, and the first MVP. So that should be, I don't know, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna make some more mistakes. That's what life is.
Awesome. Cool. So in the book club voice channel, I have pasted in the link for the live stream. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to, in addition, I want to pull up the competitive spectrum, because I feel like that will be a really interesting thing to talk about. So yeah, I suppose just opening it up, like any thoughts around I mean, like, what's the main thing that that sort of stuck with you for those who managed to actually watch the web reputation systems video?
I haven't even seen it yet, so I'm more here for the discussion. We usually watch it though, yeah? So
definitely. James, what were you gonna say?
Same as Neona. Haven't watched it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, this is the party, I thought. This is why we come here, so that we can like throw popcorn at the screen.
I just missed everybody.
Yeah.
This is where we have to put our hand up and say we didn't do our homework.
Oh no.
It's
Okay.
the early days of Catalyst. It's hard to get the homework done.
Exactly. That's fine. Anyway, you
I
know
didn't know
what?
how to cheat off of somebody. Where was the Coles notes?
What was I gonna say? Yeah. Who here was on the latest town hall?
Again, eh?
Oh my god, I need to be better at this. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I have a reputation prompt though. I mean, so Neona's answer to this question, and I did see your proposals, and they look great. And I'm not just saying that for this is exactly what an initial proposal to Catalyst is supposed to be, right? And you bring, by you, I'm saying all of us, we all bring our messy self to these proposals and our imperfect understanding
follow
of a problem,
the link.
So that we can work together with the community to understand the problem
on Cast,
better.
the Cast server, if you go over to the stage area,
data persists in the internet.
Yeah.
So if I try to show up
that's right,
and bring my imperfect self, even as I evolve, that imperfect past self can haunt me. If it's the thing that comes up in SEO, for example, right? If it's the first thing that somebody finds about me months later. So how do we build maybe an online reputation system that accounts for the fact that people change. And as a matter of fact, the best we can hope for is for people to do exactly what Miss Leona just said. Hey, I don't know if I did it. I have no idea if I did Catalyst right. I put myself out there though. And by doing so, you moved the community forward, right? And you might be embarrassed by those thoughts someday, but that shouldn't hurt you. That should be, that's good. That should be a benefit to your reputation. I'm just not 100% sure that we can ensure that. So yeah, just wondering what people think about that.
I might actually have a quick thought right away. Is that's something that's been plaguing and concerning me, is how do we allow for, I keep addressing it as proper murmuration in a flock or a swarm. So there's this study that's from like 2015 that said that if everyone just drove with enough space between cars, that traffic jams would be reduced something like by 50%. Because we don't allow for each other to readjust in the skies so much while still being a part of the pack. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about, is that we spend so much time nitpicking the mistakes of others instead of celebrating them as these human error bits that we should naturally be kind of allowing to shake off. And I think with technology, the way that if we, sit with truth and patience with the human condition, that we can allow for these safe spaces to develop, so we are allowed to show up with our full selves without this shame. Because the shame means that I'm a bad person because I made a mistake, and there's the line between guilt and that, whereas guilt says I might have made a bad decision, but I am not bad myself. Like going back to the Ubuntu concept, where if somebody in a village made a mistake, the villagers would circle that person, just remind them over and over about all the times that they did well, because humans are creatures of mimicry and emulation. So we need to see proper examples of what we should be doing, not so much highlighting what we're not supposed to be doing. And in tech words, burn rate. Sorry. I'm thinking about trying to utilize metadata and smart contracts in a novel way, if you will, to save on data consumption, but still utilize the potency of the chain.
I agree with everything you just said, but don't want to.
This is our friends, and I appreciate you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, my mic is live and I'm just processing thoughts and clicking too much.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, to James's point, the idea of and by the way, Stephen, if you're able to, to join, please do, because I've invited you a few times because I'm still trying to learn this thing. I've invited you to speak. I don't know. I'm assuming it's on your end that you haven't accepted the offer to speak or whatever. Yeah, wait, but I can see that your hand is up. Let's see. Oh man. Allow requests from everyone. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'll just invite to speak again. Oh wait, is it because he hasn't got a role? Maybe. No, but he does have a role. Oh, I'll tell you what. I'll add you into Proto as well, just for good measure. Invite to speak. Yeah. So yeah, Stephen, do let me know. Either on here or by like private message or direct message. Yeah. So to the point that James just made about the social aspect of it, I feel like that's quite, and Neon as well, like the point of acknowledging that these are human beings at the end of the day. Like what we're doing from a technical standpoint, right? We're allowing for folks to enter an environment that has a technical framework that allows for good governance. But if this system doesn't actually acknowledge, in a way, the humanity, the the softness, for lack of a better word, the mushiness that, you know, is human psychology.
Filthy realness.
Yeah, and emotion, and you know, yeah, like James said, if someone comes along and like does it wrong, quote unquote, that's, you know, enough to be off-putting. And you know, we all know that once someone experiences a negative experience, that can be super pervasive, right? Like people, like negative is a lot more pervasive than negative, right? So if someone experiences, you know, a negative thing in one particular context, they then, you know, carry that with them, and someone asks them, oh, hey, what do you think of X? They're most likely to voice their opinion, elicited or non-elicited, about something if it's negative than if it's positive. So I feel like, yeah, this is something which, as a community, especially in this sort of catalyst environment, this is something that we need to improve on, which we didn't really have, especially in Fund 2. Like, you know, in the beginning, the fact that, you know, that whole thing happened in Fund 2, and, you know, there was just, you know, this illustration of a lack of empathy or humanity, you know, was really disappointing. But I feel like maybe the community has kind of improved since then. But we need to really fundamentally enshrine these feedback loops of like acknowledging people's humanities, and, you know, the goodness, and sort of, yeah, rewarding that, you know, having people's reputation be a reflection of their, you know, of their awesomeness as a human being, basically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree very much. So I think that being allowed to show what you're proud of will allow us to reflect more on what we spend our time on, which might allow us to be a little bit less judgmental of self and others. And I feel like it might have been too much compassion for the community that showed a lack of compassion in Fund 2, because maybe, you know, the idea of the community protecting the community made the community hyper vigilant, and that could be a thing too, right? Because they're protecting their baby. You got, this is everyone's brand new little baby just trying to walk, and you're like, oh, no, don't walk over there, don't do this, don't do that, and it's out of care and protection. But again, allowing people to make the mistakes and allowing the outliers to take their time to catch up is a kindness that is hard for us to show, because we, as animals, when we face something like fire, we're like, oh, fire's hot, okay, look at the fire, fire's hot, the fire's hot, and our brains acknowledge that fire so hard because we try to avoid it. But as humans that can work with fire, we can realize that can be an ultimate tool, but we have to be able to address our fear, make some mistakes, but do it in safe environments.
Yeah, absolutely. Although in Fun 2, I feel like it was more ego than sort of protecting the thing. But yeah, no, your point definitely stands. Right. So, but Niona, I'm curious actually, because like you have some interesting well, actually, no, go ahead, Jonathan, and then I'll come back to my question to Niona.
I was still playing with buttons, but no. Well, I came in post Fund 2, so I didn't see the full. I've only sort of heard glimmerings of the issues and fallout from it. But yeah, that happens. I very much think it's probably just teething issues. Everyone gets cranky, and I think that yeah, it's crystallizing and everything's messy, so you don't see any form, any beauty until later. And I think I came in just at the right time because this book club's awesome. So maybe that's why I looked into it. But it's sort of like the anonymity, like going back to what James was saying, the anonymity of Snapchat versus Facebook, where Snapchat is ephemeral and Facebook is immortal. You kind of want a mix of that as you're putting yourself out there, but then also don't want it hanging around too long.
I'm pretty sure the Snapchat leaks proved that to be somewhat incorrect, unfortunately, though, too, because there was a lot of rogue nudes, and they weren't expected. So, realistically, a lot of our stuff, whether we like it or not, has been tracked for forever. And I think allowing that to go back into the hands of the people who are directly affected by this data would be better served, because self-advocacy is really the only way to get humans to make adequate changes. We just have to give them good examples and reasons. Asking the right questions really helps direct the eye, right? So when one's driving, there's the tendency to veer towards whatever you're looking at, and it's the same thing with positives or negatives. So if you're trying to drive the road, it's best to watch the road, not the trees that you've just passed.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that, and I think it's probably one of the promises that blockchain has, is that it is dealing with things that can become self-advocated. So you become steward of your own data, your own privacy, your own proposals. Seems like a good thing to be able to do, and to share it for portions of time, relevancy, and then withdraw it. How that all works will be interesting to see.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? That always seems to happen. Like, you unmute and then, like, pressure, say something profound. Yeah. Wait, this Snapchat thing. Apparently I was living under a rock. I'm curious to hear more about it. Snapchat leaks. I mean, I know about the fappening, but obviously that's iCloud specific. Again, tying back to what we were saying earlier before we started going live, the whole seclusion, or sort of, the demarcation between the different communities, like iOS and Android, for example, as is illustrated by the whole Clubhouse. It's like fountains, it's a whole separate bathroom, separate fountains, drinking, but like a digital version maybe. And but not as explicit. I don't know, maybe it is explicit. I don't know. Yeah, the whole idea of I suppose, what's the word, explicit and implicit is interesting, right? Going, whether it's in the context of platforms and the environments that they choose to create. Because obviously with Clubhouse, the idea there is that, as Soph pointed out, it's not Apple's sort of proprietary way of doing things that is directly a result of Clubhouse being iOS only. In a way, it's like, okay, there is a reason why a third party chose to build there, right? Amongst many things, the amount of sort of social cachet that they have from creating a safe environment, right? Because they vet the apps. Paying is super smooth because from early in the day they were able to fundamentally have payments built in, right, with like iTunes and stuff. So whenever you get an iPhone, you basically create an Apple ID, and with that, you have most likely have a bank card of sorts linked to it, right? So then that enables frictionless, not completely void of friction. There's still some friction, but it's sort of like the difference between having physical cash and like a plastic card, right? Like, you're more susceptible to just spending if all you're doing is swiping or just tapping a card, right? That the weight of your actions isn't as explicit, right? So I feel like there's a whole bunch of stuff underlying here, right? Where the choice, again, coming back to this idea of Clubhouse and the sort of the seclusionary nature of it, or exclusionary, is not an explicit thing, it's more of an implicit thing, where they chose to be in an environment that suited them, right? And most likely from a monetary standpoint, say, right? Because it's a business that's only right for them, to do. So I feel like it brings up an interesting point in the context of decentralized technology, and I suppose Catalyst as well. Like, what's a balance between security, right, having things be super like restrained, and enabling like crazy ideas? And yeah, there's a whole bunch. I'm keen to hear what Soph has to say.
Yeah, it does touch on the topic of the conversation. Also, I think especially interesting is the notion of identity, which is really like, if you want to do any kind of reputation, it starts with identity. Nowadays these identities are so tied to companies, right? Your Google identity, your Facebook identity, they are becoming even more relevant than your government identity, right? What can you do with your government identity? Well, not some important things, but those other identities become really, they become so important that, like, I think it gets a bit troublesome when so many other third parties rely on this one specific third party to provide that identity. I'm not necessarily against this idea of some company making something which is just for the people that are using it, and it's for a specific device. That's fine. But when too many things in daily life start relying on specifically that third party as a way to join in, right? There's so many things you can only do. You can only get in if you have a Facebook account, for example, or a Gmail account, and then it creates really, like, it becomes more of a societal issue than just a personal social choice.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting and a tricky thing, and I think this is decentralized. Yeah, having your identity tied to corporations, as that starts to become less and less a thing with decentralized identity, once we're able to figure it out in a sort of good and healthy way, it's going to be interesting to see that transition happening. And also, as you just pointed out, like, we are still going to be faced with this notion of, maybe less so, this notion of your identity being tied into a particular environment where, to partake in something, there's a prerequisite. But I feel like, as opposed to having it be binary, for example, a little while back, I'd been really trying to figure out which hardware to get for VR, right? And I sort of came down to either choosing the HTC Vive or the Oculus. I forget which version of the Oculus. I think it was like the middle tier. And just as I was about to as I was getting close to to making my decision, it was actually made for me when Facebook decided to enforce or to introduce this thing where you could only use your Facebook login with Oculus. I was like, okay, decisions made for me, you just completely eliminated yourself from being a viable option, right? And so I went on and got the HTC Vive. And what's interesting is I wasn't alone in this. I remember when this was announced, I mean, even Palmer Luckey, the founder of Oculus, like chimed in on this on Twitter, where he was basically saying like, yeah, this, you know, this is not good. But yeah, I feel like what decentralized identity allows for is to have a lot more, I suppose, minutia, or like, yeah, I'm not being able to find the right word. So yeah, minutia, for lack of a better word. And one of the things actually that I've been considering in all of this is, it would be interesting in my just explorations and pursuits of decentralized identity to create a way that one could individually filter stuff, and then basically as collectively I could basically, I mean, it's not particularly, you know, a super novel idea, but it's yet to be implemented in a way that is, one second, my screen just decided to do some weird stuff. Hide, there we go. Okay. Ooh, what just happened? Oh no, oh no, wait, where's, okay. I thought the browser just crashed. Okay, where was I? Yeah, so it's not entirely a novel idea, but yeah, this idea of being able to subscribe to someone else's, say, grey list, right? You know, I've come across a particular, you know, app, I like it, or a particular environment which I don't like. I then, you know, choose to you know, blacklist or whitelist some stuff, you know, but then having that exist at scale will then introduce the ability for people to be able to opt in and out, right, of different products and services without requiring, you know, that binary from the top, like, oh, if it's Facebook login, then no, or if it's iOS only, then no. Yeah, it will be a lot more granular. I think that's what I was looking for before.
Yeah. I think that's that kind of granularity is important, and it's also where this, because there's a lot of talk about, yeah, blockchain brings trust, but okay, trust in what? And but I think this is also a part where it can become explicit, because the whole idea of somebody owning their own identity, that's all fun, but then, you know, how can you trust that identity if they have, like, they can say whatever, you know, like, yeah, this is my track record. Okay, sure, but if you're the only one saying that, how do I know that that's true? And then, yeah, then we use third parties. Well, if they say that, then sure. If the university says you've actually done all those courses, okay, I'll believe it. You probably did. But if you have another way to make that trustable, and yeah, I don't even think it's that much like we Leona was talking about earlier as well. I don't think it's even that much of a problem in many cases, that people can hide some of the mistakes they made or the things they did wrong. And I'm not saying like everything should be able to be hidden, like anything you've ever done, right? But that's also going a bit far directly. But in some platforms, it would be fine to just be able to let people decide which part of their identity is visible, and but then have it in such a way that anybody else can trust that, you know, if it's there, then yeah, sure, that person chose to put it there, but it did actually happen, right? There's some other authority given to that through some system in a blockchain or other decentralized technology. I think there is like a real power that's like an explicit form of trust, and where you can actually say like, well, yeah, well, let everybody manage their own identity, because even if they manage it themselves, we know there's only like there's just things they can't tamper with. Even if we give them full control, they can't go back and change whatever is on the blockchain. They can maybe decide to reveal what's like linked to that through a hash, but we know that if it's there, it's true.
Yeah,
Once you
and I
see
think there's a lot of trust that comes with that chain. Yes, and I think that is something to really emphasize, is the strengths and looking at the capabilities of the tool sets, because I think that's going to give us a lot of insight, and also looking at things from the problem space that it's operating in, right? So what's the actual challenges that people are facing, and what's the practical applications? Because right now there's a lot of discussion about almost like extra layers on top of layers, and that's a fine way to do things, but I feel like there might be more efficient ways and simpler ways to get the same thing done without, again, adding complexities. And like for me to ever say to focus on something is very rare, but I think this would be one of the times where we do want to try to keep the data as clean and simplified as possible. And power level, actually, like the later portions of it, I have worked in a lot of these concerns because it applied to my memoirs personally, because I'm going over them right now. So one thing that's really cool is how we are able to deal with things like when people have like recurring nightmares. One of the coolest ways that people can deal with a recurring nightmare is just to write out a different ending every night before you go to bed, so that until your brain believes it. That confirmation bias is such a beautiful thing, especially when you can actually use it to your advantage instead of the disadvantage that it can provide. But it really just, I think a lot of our things kind of got messy when we stopped believing in our own hands and our own minds and our own ability to decision make, because we weren't the professional, we weren't the adult, we weren't the politician, we weren't the president, where that giving up of decision making prowess allowed us to blame everything but ourselves for our decisions. And I think just giving that onus back to our capabilities will do us a lot of justice.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot in that. Yeah, because if you think of the binary, in life, folks go from being a child being told by the parent what to do, to being a student being told by the teacher what to do, to being an employee being told by employer what to do, right? So there's all of this weird dynamic, and what we now have here is the opportunity to actually fundamentally or essentially rethink that, right? With sort of decision making, again going back to this word, the granular decision making, right? And to the point that we spoke about last week, neuroplasticity, it's going to be doing that, if we're, as a kid, you're able to not only learn in an environment that's gamified and that's, say, sort of personalized education linked to your interest and your strengths, as well as understanding what your weaknesses are and enabling you to strengthen those, but in a healthy proportion, all in all, in a manner that actually optimizes your motivation, right? And at the same time maybe even taps into society's need for a particular skill set, right? Because at the moment, we definitely don't have that, right? We're having a school system which actually I came across this really good tweet by Balaji Srinivasan, where he said, well, I'll find and read it exactly, but basically roughly you're saying that the credentialing or the social signal that education trinkets historically have served are no longer going to be serving the same purpose. If anything, they're going to be signaling, I think two words which he used were, they're not going to be signaling intelligence or employability, right? So And he isn't just a no one. This is a guy who is coming back to this idea of sort of hierarchy of validity. And oh man, this is connecting to a whole bunch of other ideas. So David Deutsch, right, in his book, I forget what the name of the book is, but anyway, there's this guy called David Deutsch, and one of the ideas that he speaks about in his writing is this notion of linking what is believed to be true with authority, right? And going back to what Niona just said, if you're not the president, if you're not like this authoritative figure, which is questionable whether or not that sense of authority is actually earned in the first place. But if you are in that environment, we have historically sort of come to believe that truth is somehow linked to that. And yes, there is some aspect to it, but to the extent that we sort of connect to it right now, I think is quite flawed. If I could just quickly jump back to what Soph said, actually, the quick notes I made was this idea of redemption, right? Again, touching on what Niona said as well. We're having systems where, the idea of redemption, whether it's embedded in, for example, the prison system, right? Or should I say the legal system, or redemption in, say, in the credit system, right? It's not clear how one can actually be able to redeem themselves. And I suppose there's more, I would say, from my own personal perspective, more incentive to not have that than to have that. In the same way, this might be my tinfoil hat speaking here, in the same way, I feel like in Bitcoin in general, there isn't much attention paid to custody in terms of just like making it super awesome, because the more Bitcoin are lost, the more value there is, so the whole supply demand thing. But yeah, the final point I want to make here is the right to be forgotten, right? In a way, a point that you both have just touched on is this idea of the right to be forgotten, right? Which is again fundamentally linked to redemption. And this idea of the right to be forgotten has only just recently came, in the last like 5 years or so, came into being. So, I feel like at the core of what decentralized technology ought to consider is how to do this in a way, as Soph said, where it's not like revocable. If you've, I don't know, killed a whole bunch of children or something, this information ought to be able to be surfaced in whatever context that's relevant, and not just creating a system where people can just eliminate that aspect of what they have done, but at the same time creating an environment for people to actually be redeemed and rehabilitated, whether it's financially or physically, in terms of things that they have done, kind of thing.
I think that's a really good point. I actually have to duck out, but I love these chats, and I might even come back if you guys are still doing it by the time I'm done. But there are ways to normalize existence or the expansion of energy that is equal for everyone, like minutes. So there's ways, and there's like the Villages coin that I think was based on Ripple, which was a really good model as well. So there's archetypes out there, and it's really just looking at the situation with an open mind, working with the user base, and just giving the outliers that cushy little spot to fall on, so that we can see how they fell and hopefully provide a safer landing zone for the next one. and just assume that we were all going to fall, and that simple rephrasing structures. One of my favorite things that I kind of clued into lately is that a lot of therapy is just positive thought remixed. Like there's just positive thinking, and then there's motivational interviewing where somebody asks you what's going on with your life and they pretend to care, and they tell you that you're doing as best as you can. And then there's dialectical behavior therapy, which is you just talking differently about yourself, usually more positive. And then there's CBT, which also usually stands for cock and ball torture, because it's basically the same thing. When you get your mind to try to deal with your emotions, when usually the emotions kind of happen and our brain justifies what we're feeling with evidence from the past and or the future. So there's a lot of it is always going to be internalized, unfortunately. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing, is to how do we offboard people from these jobs of stress and burden and instilled scarcity, and start allowing them to see the value in themselves, each other, in the moments, in, you know, a deep breath, instead of quote unquote value, which is just a shiny piece of coin usually. So like again, it's really bringing value back to existence, because this forced scarcity isn't real.
Absolutely. Yeah. Quick question before you hop off. I given that you have some really interesting perspectives on just gaming and stuff, I'm curious what, coming back to, you know, to the idea of reputation systems, which is touched on in the video, in the video a bit in terms of leaderboards, and elsewhere in some other writings that I've also been looking into. But I'm just curious, like, yeah, from a gaming perspective, like, what are your thoughts on leaderboards, and how they, I suppose, affect outcomes and just psychology in general, or just general thoughts on the
I
leaderboards?
love my deviance. So in the system that I'm working on, it actually rewards deviancy. Because the leaderboards wouldn't be so packed. So it's trying to get people to look at themselves in new ways, to showcase how they believe that they themselves level up. And leaderboards, awards, that kind of stuff, those are all extrinsic motivators, which are, as far as I've seen so far, linked to like the addictive behavior of gaming the system, whereas the intrinsic motivators, if they can be acknowledged, like love, gratitude, even sex, is intrinsic, not extrinsic, surprisingly enough. But if we can activate those more often, again, allowing people to see themselves as the source of happiness, joy, and value, instead of pretty shiny thing over there, like a magpie tendency. Like, trust me, I have it. I love it. It's great times. But it's not always healthy. It's great for, you know, looking at a shiny and getting that joy. Like I trained myself every time I saw the number 42. I'm like, ooh, I'm on the path. We're fine now. You can confirmation bias yourself into anything. We might as well just start giving ourselves better stories, is all I'm thinking.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. In that, I was really excited about gamification and game systems for a long time, but the more I looked into it and the more I worked with them, the more I saw that the research just shows that it's long term just detrimental to the internal motivation. And it's in the end it's beneficial on the short term and it looks good on the short term, but in the long term it always leads to issues.
Yeah,
And it can be especially detrimental for young kids, like really, really detrimental for their internal motivations on the long term. So it's really, yeah, something we have to be really careful with.
I'm very cognizant
Trying to
of the
game life. Sometimes, you know, learning things is hard. Like the actual experience of frustration is like your body rewriting itself, like your neuron paths conflicting and stuff like that. Like that might not be entirely scientifically correct, but the frustration is tied to learning, the actual experience. And you have to learn
Sleep
to
also.
fight through that and not to avoid it, to always go for the shiny star in the easy way. So that's yeah, it's
You have to
I
be okay
mean
with a little bit of grinding, right? And that's where World of Warcraft, that kind of concept, right? They were given skill trees and level ups and stuff like that. And that's just like the framework, right? It's still, they're not really getting leaderboards and stuff in those games. They're getting the experience of learning. And that's really what feeds people at the end of the day, is this sense of community, like belonging to a guild, the sense of accomplishment. Look at my character get a new shiny object, and the sense of, that progression, that path to mastery. The flow state is hard to get into. It requires a lot of frustration and a lot of challenge. However, if we do allow it to happen, and again, give those safe understanding zones, we don't emphasize the traumatic aspects of it, I think we can really just, again, just get excited again. I think that's why the games really matter. It's just making sure that they ask for the right things. And it's for people to show us why what they're doing is mattering. And I think there's some cool things that I just want to play around with, but I should actually go. Have
Alright.
a great day, and as always, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much for blessing us with your presence, Niona.
Thanks.
Yeah,
See
good to see you.
ya.
See you.
See ya. Cool. Yeah, we can keep going till like past, and then we can call it a day at that point. Yeah, but if any of you need to leave, by all means, feel free to do so. But Jonathan, you've been quiet for a while. I'm curious to hear what you've been pondering.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Game theory and all that stuff. I haven't done an awful lot of reading into. I just know that I really like games. so the sort of dopamine addiction side of it is pretty evident, like right the way through my my growing up, and where it ends. We have Soph was saying, we have to regulate and do some grind to get progression in anything in real life. And so how does that represent itself in game? I mean, I moved from gaming into work, self-employment, never really took employment, to be honest. But you just become your own taskmaster, and that actually is the most motivating thing for me, is knowing that I've got responsibilities and I need to get on and do stuff, and that helps me progress. But if I could make it more enjoyable for myself, then I'd appreciate it. So, I think there's a lot to learn from the psychology in and around the frameworks that games, are really successful at, and working on our physiology to create, the healthy addictions, as it were, is a useful skill to learn. Someone touched on, I think it was Nona touched on sleep as well, and I was fascinated for a while about lucid dreaming and being able to manipulate your dream life, so you're actually taking control of it, and that is something that comes about through pattern recognition, and it does. I never pursued it because it looked like it was quite hard work. You have to spend a lot of time and energy into doing something like that. And there have been times when I've been asleep and dreaming and been in that sort of half sleep state where I can control things. But that is fascinating to me, because you're in a universe that is unlimited then, and you have some control over it. So you should be able to produce and do things far more quickly than you can in real life. But again, that's not reality. So what Sophie was saying is that you do need to get back to how can that be useful to us in the real world, is the intriguing thing for me, and avoiding dopamine addiction. I spend far too long playing Free Cell, and I've been playing it since I was 18 or something, and mid 40s, late 40s now. So that's a long time to be playing a stupid little game, and there's no huge reward in it, but there's something in it that just keeps me entertained. Very strange. Don't know why. Why is that?
Yeah, I feel like I mean, there's a bit of underselling there, where there's definitely a bunch of value if you're doing something for close to what is it, 20 years. There's definitely something of value that you're getting intrinsically. And the point that Niona made about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic is really quite valuable in thinking about all of this. One of the things, actually, I'll quickly bring up the where is it? There we go. Yeah, the competitive spectrum here on the live stream, for those of you actually having a look at the screen. Which it breaks down the different groups, so to speak, of well, 5 in this case, that people tend to fall into when it comes to reputation, I suppose, within a community or within a system, right? Which is inherently tied to their sense of motivation, right? So the 5 are caring, collaborative, cordial, competitive, and combative, right? So even just going through those quickly, like you can get a sense of the demarcation, or sort of should I say, the balance of extrinsic versus intrinsic, right? So with caring, for example, it's, and what's interesting is like the further out you go, from caring all the way to combative, like it's a bit like going from intrinsic or internal to extrinsic/external. And in many ways, the way that you reflect how you acknowledge and what's the word I'm looking for? Not just acknowledge. I suppose, the way you, for lack of a better word, the way you acknowledge people's contributions is also tied into it. So in a combative environment, most like people want they want their recognition. That's it. Their recognition to be external, right? Which in a way is linked to the motivation as well, it being external, right? Kind of this kind of mutual sort of feedback loop there. Whereas with something like caring, it's very much the opposite, obviously opposite from the external or extrinsic, but also the relationship between the motivating and the sort of acknowledgement layer or recognition. With caring, it's a lot more intrinsic. A good example that in the video Randy Farmer gives is, if you have a community of like cancer survivors or something, or folks going through a particular ailment, and you introduce a system of like points or something, right, and a leaderboard, it's not going to fly well. So that in this particular environment, it makes a lot more sense to have things like having recognition be actually directly sent to the person, right? Whether it's like an email, like, oh hey, by the way, here's the value you've created, or here's the change that you have sort of made within the community, in a way that communicates, hey, we're not putting like a number to this and no one else is seeing this, is just you, we're just communicating this to you to say, hey, thank you for being a part of this community. You are making a difference. And so I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on
Yeah, I think those distinctions are certainly relevant, and they also tie into that question, like what about leaderboards or point systems and things like that. And one thing to take into account with these game systems is that our brain is really good in abstracting our internal drives and sort of confusing them, and this really ties into addiction, where
Mm.
you are a multitude of systems, right? And they communicate with each other, but that communication is not perfect. So addiction is often one signal getting mixed up by one part. You need to hydrate. You take another sip of beer, which is going to lead to another signal to hydrate more, which is going to lead you to take another sip of beer, right? Because it's the idea of drinking is like, oh, that should solve this problem, right? It gives you the relief because the sensation of moist in your mouth is like, that should be the right thing to do when I have this sensation coming from other parts of my body. But in this case, it's you've mixed it up, right? It's not the right action. And but money is a really good example of how strong our brain can abstract things, because money is nothing, right? You don't want money, you want food. But you'll do anything for money, right? Because yeah, it can get you food, but it's also this status thing, and it just becomes an abstraction for everything. And that's the danger with the gamification systems, because you just refer to like natural drivers that exist for people to be motivated. And some people have more intrinsic motivation and really go off on that. Others need more social motivation, external motivation, but that's important, this addition, that the external motivation by nature is social. But like a rewarding system that gives you points and shiny stars is not very, it's sort of, sometimes they try to make it social, like a leaderboard, but it's not very social, right? Because only the leaders get the attention. Where you can of course design it in slightly different ways, make more relative leaderboard from you within your network. But even then, for some people, that comparison, that competitiveness is not what motivates them. It actually demotivates them, right? Where others want that. But if you just show all the scores within a certain, I don't know, a learning app or something within your network, for some looking at that, they'll make the leaderboard in their minds, right? And two of them might even, they're going off on this competition part. Or others are just looking at how much their friends are doing and sending them friendly messages. Oh wow, you got back into it again, but that's so great. So everybody will use that information differently. Some will just do it for their personal track keeping. They like their personal graph to look at it each month and to see themselves progress, right? And that's so to have those kind of tracking systems in place, but in a more the design shouldn't force you how the game works, right? You should be able to come up with your own motivation game, and that's really important. That it isn't forced, because then you stop trying to motivate yourself, and you just leave it up to the system, because we like the path of least resistance, and this is just giving us that satisfaction that I did good, and we've been what's the word I'm looking for, sort of conditioned, through the school system. Like, as long as you get that green thingy or whatever, the check mark or the red cross, um, it's been hammered into us. Do you get the cookie or not?
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
you've
going
made.
back more to the social is the end conclusion, that we need to focus on those already existing internal or social external motivations and really allow them to be, instead of forcing them.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you've made so many good points there. I'm looking forward to actually um watching this back and just sort of like absorbing and even making more notes. But yeah, one thing that comes to mind here that I feel like, you know, in the next 5 minutes it would be nice to actually have, you know, a conversation about this, and we've kind of been skirting around this idea. It's, you know, and you've touched on it a bit there as well, which is these feedback loops, right? They can manifest themselves in negative ways because, you know, we're getting this feedback from something that's innate and sort of, you know, natural, you know, like thirst, you know, love, you know, intimacy, all these basic needs, but then how they're met, right? That's then in a way like affected by, for lack of a better word, past traumas, right? Sort of like, you know, some of these ideas Nyono's kind of alluding to, you know, with the, you know, writing out, you know, the ending to the nightmare kind of thing. But yeah, the key thing that I want to ask here is, if someone is inherently like an extrovert compared to an introvert, like, what's the, I suppose, the morality behind, say, one manifestation of this is from a mental health perspective, if you're externally motivated, if your locus